Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 685. And today's date is June 4th, 2015. And the title of this episode is U.S. Government and Kiev Preparing for the Next Major Offensive. Now, before I get started, I just want to let everyone know the video interview with Dabu 7 is now uploaded to the X22 Report Spotlight. You can see this video on the x22report.com. Just come on over to the site. You can see it on the right-hand side, or you can go to the X22 Report Spotlight channel. All you got to do is type in X22 Report Spotlight in YouTube, and you'll be brought right to that channel. So let's get into the economic collapse news. Now, Greece, and we reported on this a couple of reports ago, where the IMF said to Greece, listen, you can miss this payment. We will bundle all the payments and you can pay this at the end of the month. And it looks like at this point, Greece is going to do exactly that. They cannot raise the funds to make the June 5th payment. So what they're going to do is they're going to miss this payment and they will bundle the payments for the end of the month. Now, this gives them some time. Maybe they're making a deal, maybe they're not with the ECB and IMF at this point. They can't reach any type of deal because they're completely separate and apart. We see the EU is offering 35 billion euros until 2020 if they just do what we want. If you just implement our programs like austerity, we will put you into debt and we will destroy your country with 35 billion euros. It's a great deal. They should take it. Well, they have been taking this. They have been making these deals, and it does not work out. It makes it worse as time goes on. So it looks like at this point, they're just going to bypass this payment and continue on with the haggling of the deal. And in the background, Greece is most likely making deals with Russia and the BRICS system. And that hasn't been ironed out yet. And they're not just ready to exit. And it seems like we're heading down that path. Here in the United States, what are we seeing? Well, right now, initial jobless claims have hit a 42-year low. Except we're seeing in Texas, there is still trouble because initial claims are still rising. And of course, as we know, the BLS does not count all those jobs that were lost in Texas. They kind of look the other way. They don't even want to notice it. And we can see at this point in time, they are continually manipulating all these statistics because they need to show everyone that we are in this fantastic recovery. And when we look around, we can see that we are definitely not. Everything that we've been looking at, everything that we've been reporting on shows us that this economy at this point in time is collapsing. Actually, we're in a depression. The government, central bankers just don't want to admit it yet. We see the bond market is starting to crumble and crash. And a lot of people have warned us and told us to look at the bond market. Greg Manarino has told us to look at the bond market. A lot of other financial analysts have told us to look at the bond market. When you see that falling apart, that's the problem right there. Since mid-April, the yield on a 10-year German bond has shot up from 0.05% to 0.89%. But much of it has come this week. Just a couple days ago, the yield on a 10-year German bond was sitting just at 0.54%. And it just isn't Germany. Bond yields are going crazy all over Europe. And investors have lost more than $500 billion. It looks like the central bankers at this point are losing control. The European Central Bank by creating all this money, telling us everything is fine. They've been trying to keep these yields down. But the exact opposite is happening. And we need to watch this very, very carefully. Because we know that the bond market is in a bubble. We understand the stock market is in a bubble. The automobile, the housing, the student loan, the derivative, the tech market, these are all bubbles created by the central bank. Consumers in Europe, Canada, Australia, the United States, the private Western central bank countries, they are no longer adding to the economy to make the economy improve. It's all the central banks. We see the IMF today, they're panicking. They're looking at the situation and they're saying, Fed, you cannot raise the interest rates at this time. The IMF has cut 2015 growth forecast from 3.1 down to 2.5. Well, I don't even think we're going to see 2.5 in real numbers. Yes, can they manipulate it? Are they going to manipulate GDP right now? Yes, we know they are. We know they're going to pick and choose what information they want in the GDP. They've done this before. They went all the way back to 1929, added in research and development, and recalculated the GDP all the way up to the present time. And they're doing it once again because right now we're seeing GDP in the negative range. The Baltic Dry Index, the lowest we have ever seen. That is the raw material used for factory production, and factories are screaming at us, we're not producing. Because there's no demand for the goods. And they're saying the Fed should wait for tangible signs of wage price gains. The dollar is overvalued, they're saying. And it's curbing the U.S. growth and jobs. And they need to delay the first rate increase until 2016. Well, we know what's going to happen if they raise interest rates. I mean, if they raise it, it doesn't mean the next day things are going to fall apart. That happens slowly. As they continually raise it a couple points every so often, this is when it hurts the people. Because as interest rates rise, you have auto loans. It knocks people out of the range of what they can afford. You have the housing market. It knocks people out of the range of what they can afford. The people who are going to the free short-term window money lending area where the Fed allows people to take the money at 0% interest, now they're going to have short-term interest. This will be a problem in pumping up the market. So a lot of these things all interrelate, and it will cause a major problem. And this is why they're getting nervous. Because look, the interest rate right now is ticking up just a little bit, and the amount of mortgage applications are declining at the same time. And this shows us, as this goes up, more and more the applications for refinancing and mortgage applications will decline. And this will be a huge problem because these people will be knocked out of the market. They will not purchase houses, and the housing market will crumble because they do not have enough investment companies, hedge funds, foreign investors paying in cash to keep this pace up, and they know it. And they thought they were going to increase this bubble, the housing bubble, by building up the market, pushing the prices higher, and they thought the American people were just going to take up the slack and everything would be fine. But that did not happen. We see countries are out there protecting themselves because they see what is coming. They're moving away from the U.S., from the dollar. They're trading in their own currencies. We see Venezuela just finished an agreement with Russia, and they're going to see an additional $14 billion in investment in the South American country's oil and gas industry over the coming years. The new investment will reportedly go towards further developing Venezuela Orinoco Belt in the country's northeast, which is home to some of the world's largest reserves of crude oil and already contains 250 oil fields. And now you know why the United States government central bankers wanted to get into Venezuela. You know why they wanted a color revolution in this country. They wanted to replace the government, put in a puppet government, and they would have all of this oil to prop up the dollar. Not for the benefit of the people, the benefit of themselves. To keep the system chugging along. But that has failed. Venezuela, Argentina, Brazil, cozying up with China and Russia, not the United States. We see Saudi Arabia, who works for the United States government, is looking at Russia now and is considering an opportunity of investing into the Russians' oil sector. Most of these countries are looking and saying, you know something? I don't know how much longer the United States will be able to continue on. And they're protecting themselves. We understand the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. More members are looking to join this. We see Afghanistan, alongside Iran, India, Pakistan, and Mongolia, right now have observer status in the SCO, and Afghanistan hopes to join the SCO. And the other countries will follow. So when we look at this, we can see that countries are starting to move away from the private Western central bank system. They're protecting themselves. They're looking what's coming. They realize they need to make a switch, and this is exactly what they're doing. Here in the United States, we understand Obamacare, and I've discussed this many, many times before, and if you want to hear any of it, just go back to any of my other reports. I usually mention Obamacare, but we understand that there is going to be a court ruling, and it could end subsidies for about 6.4 million Americans. And the states that are going to be hit the hardest are Mississippi, Florida, North Carolina, Wyoming, Louisiana, Arkansas, Georgia, Alabama, Wisconsin, Alaska, and South Carolina. If this does occur, this is going to be a huge problem for Obamacare, because all of these people then would have to either return the money and then pay for Obamacare. And guess what? They can't afford it. So they would lose 6.4 million Americans off of the system. And already we see, and of course it's called the Affordable Care Act, and as we know, every single one of these bills that become laws, whatever their title is, it is always the opposite. We see right now Obamacare continually goes up, and the reason why it's continually going up, it's because when this bill was created, it was created by the insurance companies. They all got together and they said, listen, we can get rid of competition. All we have to do is band together, present this to the government, the U.S. government, have them intertwine taxes, have them put a penalty on it so it forces people into the insurance arena, and we can set prices at whatever we want if we just stick together. And we can continually raise the prices and nobody can say anything. There's no competition. You don't have to drop your rates. And we can give the people the worst insurance ever. We can give them high deductibles. We won't even have to make payouts. And we can see at this point in time, this is exactly what's happening. I mean, Obamacare is set to increase 50% by next year. These premiums are continually going up. And if you cannot make those payments, you still have to make a payment because there's a penalty for not having the insurance. It's a win-win for the insurance companies and the government. It's a lose-lose for the people. And this is exactly what's going on right now. Now, something interesting with Twitter is occurring. There was an app called PolitWhoops, which allowed the application access to Twitter, and it cached all the tweets. Even if you deleted it, it captured it. And they used to take those deleted tweets from politicians and they let people see them. And now Twitter is saying that they will not allow this application to interface with Twitter anymore. Now, Are they receiving pressure from politicians because it's making the politicians look in a bad light or something like that? We don't know, but at this point in time, they will not allow this application access. And if a politician tweets something and he gets a bad response or something like that and he deletes it later, you don't know anymore because this application no longer has access. And we'll have to look at this very carefully and see why and what were the reasonings for this. And I'm going to say that this must have been pressure from certain politicians. Now, we see out in California, a new California privacy bill would require law enforcement to obtain a warrant or wiretap order before searching a person's smartphone, laptop, or any other type of electronic device. Now, I don't even know why we need a law for this, because the Fourth Amendment is very, very clear, where the Fourth Amendment says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. Now, they put that word effects in there on purpose because they couldn't cover everything. And I hate to say this, just because it's not written on paper and it's written on electronic form, it makes no difference. It's your private information, and if anybody wants to read it or search through your personal belongings, they need a warrant. Now, California decided that they needed a law to cover the law that was already written to make it clearer. But what the bill does is brings the state statute into the 21st century to catch up with technology. I don't know if there really needs to be a catch up, because who cares if the written word is on stone, paper, or it's in electronic form? It's the person's private information. If you have a password on your phone, the reason for it, it's because your information is locked up and private. If you have a safe with your information inside the safe, it's private. You need a warrant. There's no difference here. I don't know why people are so confused with this. And they're saying that, yeah, of course, now you need a warrant. But the question is, did you need a warrant to go into a mailbox to receive a letter? Yes. But why didn't they need a warrant to do the same thing, to read your email in the phone? Well, you do. The lawmakers were trying to confuse the situation, but there is no confusion. The Fourth Amendment is very, very clear. And we don't need laws on top of laws. Just follow the one law that is there. And the Founding Fathers made it very, very easy to follow. They made it very clear. And of course, all these government agencies love to create laws on top of laws on top of laws to make sure that we all follow the same law. And then it gets too confusing and too bloated that nobody knows what the law is. Well, you do know what the law is. Just follow the Constitution and the rights of the people. It's very simple. It's laid out. That's all you need. Now, we understand the United States government central bankers have set up the USA Freedom Act. They passed it. And of course, as we know, freedom doesn't mean that you have freedom. Again, every time they create a bill with these ridiculous titles, it is always the opposite of what it really is. I mean, it sounds great, like the Affordable Care Act, as the prices continually rise, the Patriot Act, where it has to do with all the patriots. Well, no, it really doesn't. It's the actual opposite. The USA Freedom Act. Freedom is not when someone spies on you. And when we look at this bill, now law, most of the concessions made by the government are entirely hollow. The secret FISA courts still exist. Lone wolf surveillance authority and roving wiretaps still exist. They can still grab oodles of other data like medical and business records. And the U.S. Attorney General has been awarded new emergency powers to use his or her sole discretion, just in case the secret courts might be uncooperative. Section 107K 3B of the new law specifically states that call detail records do not include the actual content of the call itself, or your name, address, financial data, cell site location, etc. So basically, they can't archive your phone number, but everything else is fair game. Lawmakers also managed to sprinkle all sorts of other worthless provisions into the USA Freedom Act. And you have to remember, once they pass CISA, all of these companies who are spying on you, collecting this information, and then once they hand it over to the government, they are no longer liable and cannot be sued. So it sounds great on the surface, but they are doing the same exact thing they've always done. Nothing has changed. Actually, it's gotten worse now. So that is not free whatsoever. Just like the TPP or the TTIP, where that's secretive. But the people out in England are a little upset. They've been protesting. And Britain could be flooded with harmful chemicals currently banned in the European Union if the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership deal is signed next week. We see there are anti-TTIP protests at the G7 in Munich. They're marching because they don't agree with this. And this is the people of these countries. Just like here in the United States. Yes, they want to pass the TPP, but this is not a benefit to the people. This is why they've kept it secret. They don't want you to know what's really in there. And we've had leaks. We had information, and what we've seen so far, it's not good. It benefits the corporations. It benefits the bankers. And it does not benefit the people whatsoever. We understand out in the Pacific, as we heard from Obama and other officials, they've been telling us that they have to contain China. We know Ashton Carter was making the rounds. We understand there's more military assets being maneuvered into this region. They're going to build that base in Okinawa no matter what the people say, because they need to keep them safe and secure. We see in the Philippines, they are building a naval base. It's in the middle of construction. It's very close to Spratly Islands in the South China Sea. This military base is the closest base once it's finished. And this military base will be able to accept U.S. ships. So we can see they're continually encircling China. They're containing them. A lot of the U.S. fleet is in the Pacific. And they're just putting and positioning everything into place. And we've seen this for a long time now. And it's gotten worse as time goes on. Out in Ukraine, the U.S. government will not release any information on what happened with MH17. Mary Harf was out there, and she is saying that the U.S. government will not unveil any additional data concerning last year's crash in Malaysia MH17. So just forget it. Don't even worry about it. There's nothing new here. Well, they know what happened. Satellites were positioned right above. And they know if that information ever got out there, it would be a complete disaster for the United States. And this is why they're keeping it a secret. Actually, they made a pact between the United States, Ukraine, and other countries that this will all be kept a secret. We see in Ukraine things are getting worse. It's accelerating. Actually, it seems like they're keeping the time schedule where we thought they were going to keep, where an offensive was going to occur this summer. And it looks like they're right on track. Ukraine's parliament on Thursday, they passed a law allowing foreign armed forces to support peace and security in the country. Now, actually, they're bringing them in because most likely they want to enact martial law. Because Poroshenko, as we know, created the bill where he can declare martial law anywhere in the country or to certain territories, and it seems like this is where he is headed at this time. Now, we see Poroshenko pushing propaganda. Now, they've been pushing propaganda maybe a month or two now, because this always comes before the major offensive, because they need to make everyone believe that Russia and the southeastern people are about to do something. And I said this before. During or right before the Minsk II agreement, the southeastern people were pushing the Kiev forces back. They were almost into Mariupol. They were making huge strides, moving them back towards Kiev. And they could have kept going. But they said, you know something? No, we're not going to. And Russia stepped in and said, okay, the people want to be independent. They want to have their own government. And will you allow them to do this? And of course, Kiev was losing at the time. They were losing a lot of soldiers. They were drafting a lot of people who didn't want to fight at the time. And Poroshenko saw no way out of this. It wasn't a winning situation for him, so he agreed to the Minsk II agreement. And we knew this was just a stall tactic. And now he's trying to convince everyone that Russia is building up the military. They have 9,000 Russian servicemen operating in Ukraine, and they're getting ready for a major offensive. They're building up all along the border, and they're ready to invade. Now the question is, and I've said this before, if they were making all those gains, why would they retreat, put out a Minsk II ceasefire deal, allow the Ukraine government to bring in U.S. military advisors and trainers and troops, train the Kiev military, have Congress vote on the Ukraine Freedom Act, which allows military aid, lethal weapons, to come into Ukraine? Why would they allow time for the Polish government to bring in trainers and the UK government to bring in trainers and equipment? This wouldn't help Russia or the southeastern people. It would actually make it worse. It makes no sense. What does make sense is Kiev, the United States, use this to rebuild their forces. And this is what we're seeing. And now they're going to use propaganda that Russia and the southeastern people are about to do something. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a false flag event. Or maybe they'll just disregard that and just say, you know what? We're going after them. They fired a slingshot pebble at us. They slinged a pebble at us, and it's game on. And it seems like they're not wasting any time. And it looks like we're leading up to this summer. The OSCE is out there saying, yes, we are seeing heavy weapon movement on the contact line in the southeastern region on the Kiev side. It looks like they're preparing to do something. And of course, the United States, when Marie Harf was speaking, she's the U.S. State Department spokesperson, she refused to directly acknowledge Kiev's role in violating the Minsk agreement. She said, yeah, we looked at the reports. It says nothing about Kiev violating anything. I don't know what you're talking about. There's no penalties for them. And this is what was not fair about the Minsk II agreement. If the southeastern people somehow violated the Minsk II agreement, there were penalties on Russia. If Kiev violated the Minsk II agreement, nothing. Made no difference. So Kiev had the best of both worlds. They were able to build up their troops, and they were not penalized because the United States wasn't going to penalize them. You know, France and Germany and the other EU nations were not going to penalize them. UK definitely was not. But we're seeing that this whole thing is moving forward fast. Obama at the G7 meeting is going to suggest that they extend the sanctions to Russia. He's going to convince Europe it's in their best interest to extend the sanctions. Now we know the European nations, they want the sanctions gone. They don't want to extend them. Their countries are hurting. And Poroshenko is out there screaming on the top of his head, the Russians are getting ready to invade. They're going to go full-scale invasion. Now let me just tell you, if they were going to do a full-scale invasion, first of all, they wouldn't bring in 9,000 troops and hide them in the country. If they were going to do a full-scale invasion, believe me, the US satellites and the Ukrainian satellites and the NATO satellites, they would pick it up. They would pick up all of it. First of all, Putin most likely would come in with an airstrike, obliterate the armed forces, and hit the capital. Then he would bring in all the other heavy military assets. And it wouldn't be 9,000 troops. I mean, seriously. It would be 50, 60 plus. All coming in with tanks, heavy military assets. It would be a nightmare for Kiev. And this is how you know this is all a bunch of propaganda that they're using right now. Russia is out there and they're saying, listen, back off. You're violating the Minsk agreement and you do not want to push this any further. This is not going to turn out well. Because they know at this point in time that Ukraine is going to go for it. The U.S. government is going to go for it. And I know we had a lot of military spokesmen out there, government employees, if you like to call them that now, where they're saying, no, don't worry everyone, this is not going to go nuclear. Well, guess what? It will go nuclear. Remember, whatever they say, it's always the opposite. And we're heading down that path. We're seeing Ukraine's nationalists affiliated with the extremist organization calling itself the Right Sector have been urged to cut short their vacations, and all commanders ordered to begin full mobilization. The commanders of reserve battalions should declare mobilization to build up their squads to full strength and keep their men ready to leave for combat units or training centers. They are getting ready for something big. We are in the month of June. I wouldn't be surprised between now and August we see something huge happen in Ukraine. We see the U.S. Senator Cornyn, has now made an amendment and said that the U.S. defense bill will be able to export energy to NATO allies and other friendly countries. These amendments would strengthen the strategic hand of the United States in a world that grows more complicated by the day. Not to mention more dangerous, Senator Cornyn said. They also require the U.S. Energy Department to approve liquefied natural gas exports to NATO countries and other allies. Preparing for something big. We understand in the Baltic region, NATO is going to start their 2-week maritime exercises. The perfect timing between June 5th and June 20th. And we can see this is going to include 5,600 ground troops, naval and air forces, including 49 ships, 61 aircraft, submarine and landing force of 700 troops. Just happening at the same time they're ready to mount a major offensive in Ukraine. We see out in the Middle East, the top Houthi leader, Mohammed Ali al-Houthi, is saying, listen, we will have talks in Geneva and we will participate on June 14th. They have no objections to them. But he did lash out at the president that's exiled, Hadi, and his supporters, including in the Saudi regime, for foiling any peace effort aimed at restoring peace and stability to the violence-ravaged country. He says they're putting preconditions on the talks. Of course they are. This is what the United States government central bankers do. We would love to have peace talks with you. And here are the preconditions. You need to step down, lay down all your weapons, and surrender. You ready to have talks? This is what happened with Assad. He didn't agree to them. We see at this point in time, the United States government central bankers are pushing the propaganda that Syria is working with the Islamic State. And we know they're doing this on purpose because they're getting ready to go and maneuver and get Assad in Syria. And this is why they're trying to convince everybody that this is actually happening. Syria is out there saying, listen, we know the United States government is going to the UN for these glorious attacks. The Syrian government says, we're ready to support this. We want an investigation. We want to find out who is using these weapons. The response from the United States is, oh, we don't want you involved in this. Well, of course you don't. Because they know the proxy army, the Islamic State, they're the ones who possess them. They're the ones who use them. And if Syria got involved and Russia got involved in the investigation, it would blow their propaganda, so they don't want them there. Actually, Syria was the first to demand an investigation into who was using these weapons. But of course it fell on deaf ears until the U.S. said, we think it's Syria. And we know what happened back in August of 2013 with the false flag event with sarin gas. It was not Syria. It was the Free Syrian Army. We see ISIS right now is vowing to smuggle nukes over the Mexican border, and they're continually pushing this propaganda. And we know out in California and Michigan, there are dirty bomb drills. How convenient. These two might be linked. We might be seeing an event happen very, very soon because we see many things occurring all at once. Ukraine offensive, an offensive into Syria. Israel looking to get into Iran before they receive the air defense weapons from Russia. The P5+1 talks. If they have peace, there would be no reason to invade Iran unless they couldn't get into the central banking system and put the oil on the dollar. So it looks like a lot of things are happening all at once. It's like the perfect storm of events. And we have this major economic collapse all occurring at the same time. And many other drills and events occurring. So everything seems to be coming to a head this summer. And we're going to have to watch each one of these indicators to see how this all plays out. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.